Welcome to the Storytelling with Data podcast, where listeners around the world learn to be better storytellers and presenters. We'll cover a wide range of topics that will help you effectively show and tell your data stories. So get ready to separate yourself from the mess of 3D exploding pie charts and deliver knockout presentations. And with that, here's Mike.
With us today is Andy Cotgreave, a data communications author and speaker. He's a leader in the field of data communication and literacy. Over 20 years experience in data analytics, including 15 years at Tableau. In that time, he's helped thousands of people improve their data skills. He's been a keen spotter of new trends in the industry, recently specifically focusing on the impact artificial intelligence will have on data analytics. We will, of course, be talking about that, as it is a contractual obligation these days for anyone who speaks in public. Andy is also the co-author of The Big Book of Dashboards and the book Dashboards That Deliver, which is soon to be released or just released, depending on when you're listening. It comes out on September the 23rd. Andy also writes the How to Speak Data newsletter, co-hosts Chart Chat, a monthly video series about data communication, is an extremely affable gentleman with impeccable style and a smile always at the ready, which are perfect qualities for an audio medium. Welcome, Andy.
Wow, thank you very much for the fantastic and kind intro, Mike. Great to be with my friends at Storytelling with Data. Hi.
Well, we are fortunate to have you. It's always good to spend time with you, chatting with you. Now, you and I have known each other for several years.
Yeah.
But I did get a chance to read through your upcoming book, Dashboards That Deliver, and I realized that I never actually knew how you got involved in creating dashboards in the first place. And you describe in the book the spark that inspired your very first dashboard. And I wondered if you would be willing to share that story with our listeners.
You know, it's amazing. So in the new book, all four of us, Steve, Jeff, Amanda, and I, include loads of vignettes of our own personal experience in the industry. And I was like, well, what was the first dashboard I ever built? And 20 years ago, I was working at a business research company. My job was to go and interview CEOs of small, fast growth companies. Amazing company. But the boss was something of a sociopath. You know, he ticked all the boxes, and you'd be in the researcher's room, and you would any day he might walk in and just bull someone out, absolutely tear pieces off them. I mean, that company had the highest turnover, more people in tears than I'd ever seen, and because he just wanted information about each of our projects. I was like, well, it's all in Excel. I don't want to be the person. I don't want to breathe the environment. Well, I'll just create a page I can print out. So whenever he comes to me, I'll just like, there you go, have that now. Just leave me alone. So I'd sort of gathered all the charts and the data onto a single page of A4, and hey, it worked. He's like, Andy, and I'd be like, there it is. There's your information. I didn't know they were called dashboards until about sometime after that. I certainly didn't know I was building what's called a dashboard. But I was building a visual display of information in order to facilitate understanding for a sociopathic boss. Those last two words didn't make it into our big book of dashboards, dashboard definition. But I realized, as I sort of look back with hindsight, I'm like, that was quite an important moment. And from there, made slightly better ones, and then joined the University of Oxford, downloaded Tableau. And the rest is history.
I believe that many people who are listening to this, many people you've talked to over the course of the years, could empathize with that specific two-word phrase and have felt that way on many occasions. So it's too bad it didn't make it into the book, but I'm glad we could bring it to the world here in this audio medium.
I mean, it's, going through the book, in the book, Amanda has formulated this really great framework for dashboard development, right? And, as I look back on when I was really seriously getting into building dashboards at the University of Oxford, if I'd have had that framework, I would have been way more successful than I was. But, a key part of the framework is talk to users, right? Always talk to users, because they're the ones who will be using this thing. And it's like, I could have spoken to that boss before I built this thing for him and said, what do you want? What do you want? Mm-hmm. But, he wasn't always the most approachable human being. So, anyway.
Yeah, and we learn in therapy sometimes that we don't always know what we want. So maybe he didn't know what he wanted or didn't have the words to say it. He just wanted the answers. Who is the highest in the table, I suppose?
Yes, that was one of the charts. So, so that was the starting point, the spark for a whole career.
And you mentioned one of your co-authors, Amanda McCulloch, who has joined you for Dashboards That Deliver. She is the newer of the 4 authors for the book, the follow-on, of course, to the seminal A Big Book of Dashboards that I think is on the shelf of most people who are in the dashboard building world.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that she talked about framework and process. And in the book, that is what the entire first portion of Dashboards That Deliver is given over to. It's rather than like the technical how-to or the what looks good. It leads with guidelines and blueprints for setting yourself up for success. And was that something that you had seen people struggle with in your time working with folks trying to put dashboards into place in their organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen, I've seen that through my entirety of time at Tableau. People are like, well, how do you build these things? Prior to joining Tableau, I just threw these things together without any framework and wondered why my users didn't adopt the things, right? So I'd learn the mistakes. And then we wrote Big Book of Dashboards that came out in 2017. And that was very much a book about how to make dashboards look good. Obviously, we were very humbled by the success of the book. But a lot of people were like, but how do you build them? So we didn't really, we didn't address that at all in the first book. And so I think that need has always been there. There's plenty of application development frameworks. There's plenty of books about data visualization. But again, we still don't think there's a book with a really great framework on designing dashboards or data applications. So that's what we've tried to address. So the first book is all about dashboards, how to make, or why they look good or why they succeed when they look good. And this one is about the process to build dashboards or even data applications. And I'll say Amanda, she joined the team. She's been hosting Chart Chat with us for 4-5 years. She's got a really good, different set of experience to Steve, Jeff, and I. So she's a brilliant addition to the team. And she's extremely intelligent. So her experience has led to the framework we've got, which takes inspiration from user-centered design, from Agile, and from various other places. So we're excited for the world to see it.
Yeah, when she joined Chart Chat, I was glad to see it. I knew Amanda from the DC data world. She had a lot of experience in public health, and it added on something additional, I think, to all 4 of you. I was trying to think of what is a good metaphor for the 4 of you. I don't want to put the, like which of the Ninja Turtles are you? But I mean, it's not, it's not a group of 4 interchangeable individuals. It's 4 intelligent, well-spoken, but also committed people who don't always agree on every single thing. And I think you've said that that's kind of the genesis for Chart Chat in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they're very kind words. We are also 4 stubborn individuals, which brings challenges to writing a book, right? Because we've all got great passion, but the same thing that happened in the Big Book of Dashboards is we had a unified goal. And so the passionate debates are part of the process, we've come to realize. And yes, Chart Chat was born out of the fact that when it was just Steve, Jeff, and I, we were having these really engaging conversations about chart design. It's like, well, the book's written, but we don't need to stop having those debates. And, and I'd say that to everybody. It's just great having open debate about charts, or anything is a really good way to engage people and learn about the other side. And I feel like I'm leaning towards political things, but I kind of believe that too. If we talk to people on both sides and we listen and engage, we can actually realize there's loads of common ground.
Yeah, there's always a tendency in any given community towards groupthink if you don't have competing opinions, and if you aren't then also willing to let it go. If you say, we've had this debate, we might not always come to an agreement. There's some things that we can find concurrence on. I imagine you have to. You've got 400 pages of some kind of concurrence that you were able to come to. But then there's more as well. And it's nice that people can come to Chart Chat Live, which you do on a regular basis, monthly-ish, I would say.
Yep.
And from there, people can hear those debates, and they don't feel necessarily like they're out on an island, like, oh, I thought X, but all I ever hear is Y. So it's a good service.
You all know storytelling with data, and hopefully the audience, this podcast, all are on the path of realizing that chart design is as fluid as a language, right? We use adjectives, verbs, tone, and just word structure and sentence structure to convey meaning, emotion, opinions in the way we speak and write. And guess what? All of that is available to us in charts in the way we use titles, color, annotations, orientation, mark types, etc., 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 right? And, you come to realize the longer you do this, that there is no right chart for any situation. It depends, right? On it depends on the situation and on your own desires, right?
Yeah, where's my jar? I need my "it depends" jar so we can put another dollar into the "it depends" jar.
What listeners can't see is that I'm pointing to the "it depends" banner on the wall behind me in my home office.
Yeah, we as well in our workshops are often saying this is the most common answer to any question that you're going to ask me. And look, I'm not going to claim that I'm intelligent enough that I can start dropping words like semiotics into conversation, but that is a little bit of what we're talking about, is everything that we do visually and the way we construct things is a language unto itself, and it is also open to interpretation. And so I had a workshop I was doing not that long ago where someone wanted to debate with me the legitimacy of line charts as a form, like that it was not a representative way of showing data, because if you had a point at one location on your x-axis, a point at the next tick mark on your x-axis, whatever the connector between those two, that wasn't real. That was just a figment of your imagination. You didn't know if it was a straight line or a curve up or a concave. And I was trying to get at, well, how many subdivisions of this would be okay for you? And the answer was essentially none. I just want to put dots where there are observations. And okay, I mean, if you never want to draw a line, don't draw a line. Just understand your audience is going to draw a line with their eyes and connect those dots, and there's nothing you can really do about it.
So I'm going to slightly fall on the side of that person's argument. I remember, 15 years ago, I was an absolute Stephen Few disciple, right? It was like everything had to be efficient. And he'd taken the Tuftian approach and made his approach, and it was very, very rigid. And I was like, I'm bought into that. That's the way. And I remember he had very strong arguments against curved line charts. It's like, well, because the curve interpolates trends that aren't there. I was like, yeah, Steve, you're right. But then it's like, well, the straight line also interpolates dots that might just as well be as made up, right? But every chart is a compromise, and we are using visual grammar, visual literacy to be like, the data might not have gone in a straight line. In fact, it probably did, but it's a trade-off, right?
Every visual is an abstraction of reality. We have data, and we are trying to represent it in a more efficient way, but that necessitates a lack of accuracy. That's why we've had debates about, can a bar chart have a nice rounded edge of it? Can it look like, whatever that is, the end of a pill rather than just a hard line? Or, all of those things are trade-offs. And since everything is an abstraction, it's kind of okay. It's just you having to balance those things. And it's interesting to me when you mentioned that you used to be all the way on that Stephen Few side of thing, because the first time I can remember having an actual interaction with you was back at a Tableau conference in 2016. And you were doing a presentation that was called the Visual Design Tricks Behind Great Dashboards.
Oh, yes.
And there was a slide in there where it was the spectrum of like Stephen Few all the way on one side, and there was David McCandless all the way on the other side, and I think Alberto Cairo was right there in the middle.
Yeah.
So,
that was a great slide. It was of its time, but my own evolution was, Stephen Few is right. David McCandless, who did Information is Beautiful, is a charlatan with those books, those garbage infographics. Nobody can get any insight. And then you sit and go, but why is he selling millions of copies and on Newsnight and doing TED Talks, and Stephen Few isn't? It's like, all right, people like that stuff, right? And so over time, Alberto Cairo was plowing that middle path, and I chose to take that line too. Can I tell you an interesting verbal term I learned in writing dashboards that deliver? The term semantic drift. Right. So one of the things that has I've has bugged me for many years is the definition of a dashboard. People get really hung up on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, Stephen Few got really hung up on the definition of a dashboard. Over time, we were like, yeah, just try and make sure you're building the right thing that your users want. Call it what you want. So there's a chapter in the new book about what is a dashboard, and you know, I've made this point for a long time that a dashboard was a board of wood or leather that sat between horses and a stagecoach driver in order to stop water and mud dashing onto the driver, right? That's what a dashboard originally was. And then as cars evolved, obviously the horses went, but they kept that, and then they stuck gauges on it. That became a dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
And so even the very idea that you should care what a dashboard is in business intelligence is moot because it's a term from something else. And it turns out that when a word evolves, that's called semantic drift. So that was one of the fun things I learned in the process of writing the book.
And because semantic drift is a thing, you can get away with saying it's not exactly important to precisely define what a dashboard is, as long as we are communicating well enough to understand that we're talking about roughly the same thing.
Yeah.
And arguments over, well, that's not really a dashboard. Well, that's just pedantry. That's not actually moving the conversation forward.
Yeah. Nick Daybarra, in his book, he's got a really detailed taxonomy of dashboards. And I really like that approach, you know, because, but again, it's still underneath an umbrella of data communication assets, right? What are we trying to do? So, you know, we encourage users to go look at that, look at obviously the storytelling with data stable and dashboards books as well, to try just, as long as you have your users in mind and are delivering something they need, call it whatever the heck you want.
Right. I think that falls along with when you were talking about why is McCandless popular? This is just infographics. Well, but sometimes that is what users want. Maybe they don't need all of the detail. They just need to be shocked or interested or engaged with something and get a top level, and that is fine.
There's one of the chapters. So in the book, we've got more real world scenarios, just like in the book of dashboards. And one of the chapters is about the NASA Hyperwall, which is in NASA, the sort of head off, well, the NASA offices in Washington, D.C. And that is a 50 or 70 foot long wall of data information that people see when they walk into that NASA building. And you're like, oh, is it a dashboard? It's certainly very big, bigger than most dashboards. And the charts are all, there's some circular charts, there's some radial charts, there's charts that look like portholes. You know, so it's, I mean, in some ways it is like, no, it's not a dashboard. But what was NASA trying to do? They are trying to communicate the gist of climate information to an audience of people who are walking into a building. So they're not exactly data prepared or even data literate at that point. But even if they are, they haven't walked in to examine data. But it is communicating the understanding at the level they need for the time at which they are looking at that piece of information. And so I think it's a really good example. And it's just one of those that pushes the envelope a little, which I always like.
And it always makes me think of the way that dashboards or situation rooms are portrayed in film and in television. It's always that 50 to 70 foot enormous room. And I always think, oh, these poor people who have to sit at these theater seats, 9 hours a day, and that's their monitor as they have to look at this giant screen from a distance. No, it is visually appealing. It is cinematic. Yeah. And for exactly that reason that you're talking about, is people are coming in to experience it briefly, but it has an emotional impact. It has an immediate effect on getting your attention, and it communicates to that level. Yeah. And like dashboarding in that sense, just like in museums is where I like to see visualizations, because it's the same idea as you don't know what the data literacy of the people who are coming in, but there's something you want to grab their attention about and show them. And I've seen more pie charts in museums than anywhere else, but it is perfectly fine because it gets people an idea of here's the general idea of what we're talking about. And then there's the plaque next to it with more text if you want to read from it.
And you use the word emotion now, right? Now I would say 99% of dashboards that people are building are probably in businessy environments, and so emotion is probably not there. But I think this is the brilliance of the field. As people learn this field, we gather these inputs and ideas and create outputs that could cover all of these things, right? So emotion is something to be considered in the right place.
I think in business communication, there's certainly emotion, such as hooray or uh-oh.
Well, I think I totally, and that's again where our sets of books complement each other so well, right? So most dashboards, if they're being used to monitor things, I guess the alert color, right? Yeah, when something's going wrong, you need to be alerted, right? And then the storytelling side of things, definitely emotional. Yes, you're right, Mike. There's room for emotion in dashboards. I
got a little private chart chat here.
Well, that's the thing, right? Sorry, carry on.
And thinking about visualizations that were emotional, this is one of the graphs or one of the visuals that you ended up using when you were looking into generative AI, which was that Iraq's bloody toll graph, which I don't know if people who are listening are familiar with it, but it was almost an upside down bar graph of the number of deaths over the course of the Iraq war. It was in the, I want to say the
South China Morning Post.
South China Morning News. Is that correct? South
Morning Post.
Post. Yep. And this is also in your book. The last section of your book is, I would say, a written version of chart chat discussion where, like, I read it, I'm like, okay, this is where they couldn't agree. Let's have some essays where we're going to take some opposing positions just so you can hear what this happened. And then there was one chapter that was an exploration of generative AI. And as I said, because like in Sesame Street, I feel like all of our things are sponsored by the letters A and I these days. Why don't we talk about how you were using generative AI to try and create some visuals and how that panned out in the chapter.
So the Iraq's bloody toll chart, that downward red bar chart looks like a smear of blood, so it creates this really strong, visceral, emotional thing. If anybody listening has ever seen me present, they will have seen me show it. And then if you flip it the other way around, you can change the color, and it actually reveals a positive story in the data that the original one misdirect you away from, right? Well, not in a malicious way. It's just designed not to focus on. Right. So that's the Iraq bloody toll thing. So then we have generative AI, right? Can generative AI do data analysis? In my experience, trying to use ChatGPT or Claude to do data analysis feels great. I would never trust it to do anything in actual production, because one mistake and you will lose all the trust you've built as a data analyst with your teams over years and years and years. And the mistakes it makes can be really hard to spot. Even as a diligent, skilled data analyst, I've done things that I've validated, but it turns out there were heinous errors in them. Heinous, right? Like literally charting the wrong data, but I'd missed those things. So that's we talk about that in the book, the data analysis challenges. The thing that inspired the Iraq's bloody toll aspect is, I was like, well, can Gen AI help us create or imagine ways of visualizing data in the storytelling side of things and in the dashboard side of things? And there I'm like, it actually did some pretty cool things. I gave it the Iraq, the underlying data to the Iraq chart, and said, right. So my goal was, I wanted to make a chart, but I wanted it to make the editorial storytelling decisions. So I was like, here's the data, create a chart that focuses on the bad side of the loss of life in Iraq. And it is amazing. The titles, the tooltips, the language, the color scheme, it comes up with really good ideas. Then you could steer it. It's like, okay, well, now reframe the story to a positive side. And again, it does that. Somebody had said, well, maybe it already knew the story because, you've talked about it, Andy. It's been written about. Maybe it just has all of that in its training modules. So I even said, well, okay, well, try something completely original, right? Go off the wall, go out there and come up with new visual ideas. And it came up with this amazing candle, a visual metaphor of candles being lit for lost people whose lives have been lost. And the length of the candle represented the amount of people. Its implementation was kind of poor, but the idea was really good. So I'm sitting there going, well, okay, as a back and forth wingman trying to give you some inspiration for ideas, that's really cool. And then more specifically in the dashboarding side of things, I've actually found, I will say I've found Claude to be pretty good at coming up with wireframe or prototype ideas. Again, I did an experiment to ask it to do wireframes for a scenario of my own in the book. And it came up with some really cool stuff, right? And again, that's about engineering a really good prompt, being very detailed about what you want, who your users are, what they're trying to do. And it will come up with prototype ideas, right? Which are good part of the ideation process. So AI, I have a very, I have a very complicated set of opinions towards AI.
As do I, and it's well known, I think, that there are obviously advantages to be gained from it. There are drawbacks to it. There are pitfalls. I worry less about how I'm using it than about how other people are using it, which is maybe hubris on my own part. But it's good to hear people like you and like your co-authors talking about it, because you do have that credibility. You do have that experience. And so when you hear a trusted individual talking about, here's how I would be comfortable using it, here's how I wouldn't be comfortable using it, I think that is essentially, that's what we're looking for, is a blend of human experience and wisdom and tools that are going to help us be more efficient. If you're trying to wireframe the sort of dashboard that maybe I make dashboards like this on a regular basis, or maybe people in the world make dashboards that look roughly like this on a regular basis. Why do I have to reinvent it every time?
Exactly. I will say, I think that because you're right, as somebody who's authors in the field and leaders in the field, it's like, it is certainly a tool. AI or Gen AI is a tool that I have had value in using. My hesitancy in what I'm saying here is that, unfortunately, increasingly, the whole system behind AI on a much bigger thing than what you and I can do is frustrating me. I read Empire of AI by Karen Howe earlier this year, and she's an investigative journalist who's been writing about Sam Altman and OpenAI for about 5 or 6 years. And it just brings to light a lot of reasons why, beyond what we could talk about in this episode, but there's just a lot of fundamental societal problems at fault in that private ownership of such power and capital.
Certainly. Right. There are certainly ethical concerns. You could even make it into moral concerns, but in the context of our discussion about what could we do with it on a practical level, it's nice to know the limitations and the capabilities from people who have done it and have actually implemented it. And we continue to have these discussions, and we'll all continue to keep having these experiences, and either it becomes permeated in our working life, or it becomes the next thing that was big data, and then it came up and it went away, and what happened to it? Where did it go? It was the next big thing. So
I've got a keynote that I'm doing in October in Manchester, and I've done a couple of, nothing is new in analytics, and there's a few slides on big data. Having been in the industry long enough, I'll be like, oh yeah, I was in that hype.
Right. You almost want to go back to old Gartner quadrants from 2002. You want to see what were people excited about 23 years ago, and see how many of them are still
every year going to make these predictions in the analytics summits. By 2028, 90% of decisions will be made by Gen AI. I'd love to do a data project, go back for the last 20 years and look at all those predictions and see which came true and didn't.
Well, a lot of what we were talking about is putting things in a larger context, a human context, and not just the specific technical context in which we can do things. And I think that leads nicely into the sort of role that you have taken on in your own career over the time, certainly since before I've known you, but also during the last 10 years. I knew you as a host. You host the Iron Viz Awards, you host the Information is Beautiful awards nowadays. You're a speaker all around the world. How did you find yourself as an analyst putting charts together in Excel in the position of comfortably hosting something on stage in front of 20,000 people on a regular basis?
I mean, that is it. It is a question I pinch myself, or I sort of like, yeah, how the hell did that happen? I started after building those dashboards, right, back in Excel. I started connecting with the Excel user groups in the UK and spoke at a couple of events there, and quite enjoyed being an Excel expert and sharing that knowledge. I joined Tableau in 2011. And at that point, I was like the ancient mariner, right? If you know the symbol. I had seen something amazing, and I would stop anybody, be they wedding guest or anybody, let me tell you about this Tableau and data visualization thing, right? It just was the drive. So there was this thing that built in me since downloading Tableau in 2007, realizing what a rocket ship that was and how I just wanted to share ideas. But at Tableau, I mean, bless the co-founders, they invested so heavily in speaker training for everybody in the company. Anytime there was a conference, we all had really, really good speaker training. So I mean, Richard Cleese was the trainer I worked most with. I'm incredibly grateful for his skill and experience. And I just embraced every single opportunity to speak. So 15 years ago, it was like, I'm speaking in front of 50 people at a breakfast meeting. Get in, right? But then I would give it my all. And then 50 people becomes 100, becomes 2,000, 2,000. And then, 2019, I think, was probably the biggest audience we had at Iron Viz. We was at the 8,000-seater Michelob Stadium, totally full, right? And then in 2023, it was similar. And you're like, what? Right? And so it was just, so it was all at 2025. I hosted Iron Viz in San Diego, and at this point, it's like, well, it's not easy, but I know how to do it, and so I can still grow into that role. And you think, well, it happens by practicing, by taking every single opportunity to get feedback and be told what you're doing wrong and what you're doing right, by trying new things out, always having a beginner mindset, and then just embracing the opportunity, right? So, and along the way, I find myself just deeply reading books about cognitive science and philosophy and biology and history and psychology in every single field. And I don't know, Mike, for 15 years, it's just, it all just mushed around, and everything seemed to be applicable to data storytelling or the field of what we're trying to do. And so I've just had this crazy 15 years at Tableau where what they needed was what I wanted, and I had opportunities to travel around the world and become a great speaker, and I pitched myself, right? And I've got so many fond memories.
It's nearly here. The launch date for Before and After, the 5th book in the Storytelling with Data series, is just around the corner on September 23rd, 2025. It's packed with graph makeovers and practical strategies you can use right away. Pre-order now wherever you buy books. And if you're ready to level up your own data storytelling, we've got options for you. We now offer 2 on-demand courses: Behind the Slides, Good to Great PowerPoint presentations, and Design and Present complex charts in PowerPoint. Learn at your own pace and start applying new skills immediately. Prefer to learn in person? Join us in New York City on October 14th for a full-day workshop. Whether online or in person, you'll build the skills and confidence to bring your data to life. Register now at storytellingwithdata.com/public-workshops.
You are maybe the only person I've ever met who's in the secular world whose job title was evangelist.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few in the tech industry, right? But my job is to, what the job at Tableau was, inspire people. Tell them this incredible field of communication through data is really important, and then eventually go, hey, and Tableau is a really good way of doing it, right?
Yeah, and would you consider that you were or would you call yourself a natural speaker, or is it just that you had done all of this, research and that you were interested in it? Or
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember at school joining the debating society at school and just being absolutely awful. So I don't think that, certainly in the teenage years, I don't think I would have put myself down wouldn't have called myself a natural speaker. That's interesting. I've never actually stopped to think I'm not stopped to think at what point I would have realized I was a good speaker, but it probably would have been 1 to 2 years into the Tableau life, so 2012, 2013, it's like there's something about knowing my stuff, being able to work with an amazing product, and what am I doing to make this connection with the audience? And I was like, so there's something in me that makes that natural. And then something else I learned that anybody who wants to become a great speaker can do is find an avenue that allows you to speak, but maybe not in I'm a public speaker kind of way. So for me, I read a book about close-up magic in 2012, and then I was like, and it turns out close-up magic is all about cognitive science, psychology, and communication. So that inspired me to become a magician. And doing close-up magic, what a way to develop one's speaking skills, because you do the same effect, but every single audience will react differently. So you have to have an ability to speak quickly, to react, to engage, to bring the audience along with you. So that sort of side gig vastly helped my speaking, right? And then you can find that avenue through improv, through stand-up comedy, through music, through bands. There's loads of places in which you can speak and learn skills that could help you be a speaker, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I count myself among the fortunate few who've seen you do close-up magic, almost as though it was unexpected, just out of nowhere. Like, oh, well, I happen to have it. And he's holding up, he's fanning out a deck of cards as we speak too, as a matter of fact, as we speak.
If my hands are not visible in a meeting, if a virtual meeting, is because I'm shuffling a deck of cards. Well, yeah, and here's the thing many people don't know, right, about me, is they watch me go and I do Iron Viz or a presentation, and they think, well, Andy Cotgreave must be a supremely confident individual. How else could anybody stand on stage and goof around and be self-deprecating and do all the other things? And it's like, and in that realm, I mean, I am confident in my abilities to do that. But I find with magic, I'm absolutely petrified. The reason you say there is it happens as if out of the blue, is that I found with magic, I could not go, hi, Mike, do you want to see some magic? Because I just feel incredibly awkward. And then I'd feel like the pressure that I put on myself to do that was so immense. Yeah. So I was always much happier. It's like, did somebody else, Andy can show some magic. And I'll be like, I just happen to have a deck of cards. So for all the confidence you see in Iron Viz, there is also this, like, not quite shy, but this nervous close-up magician.
But what an excellent example of the effortlessness that it appears to be to the audience is a front for all of the effort and all of the practice and all of the thinking about it that you did behind the scenes, so that it does seem effortless and confident and smooth in the moment. And I think that we want to believe that, if only we were a natural speaker, if only we were charismatic, no, it's work. You prepare. You're my friend. I prepared like 2 hours for this. It's not easy.
It's not.
Everything is practice.
Well, there was one magic trick called this, that, and the other, right? People can Google it. And that was also one of the catalysts that really, I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn magic. It took me 3 years to be able to perform that trick, right? I showed it to my family a few times, but actually to go out and to perform it to new people, so that's how long it takes. But then let's get it back to data, right? Storytelling with data. The people we try and help often will be standing, presenting insights with slides that they've prepared, or without slides, right? And that's a nerve-wracking, difficult job. But you're right. I can stand up and prepare very quickly now, but that's because I've been doing it for a long time, right? The first times I was doing it, it was terrifying, it was stumbling, but it gets easier with practice.
Yep, and getting yourself in those situations, if you've never stood on a stage before and looked out into darkness, it is terrifying. And then you realize, you just can't see the people. They're there and they're rooting for you, and it's fine. You just have to get a lot of reps in and realize that nobody is waiting for you to fail. Everybody is so excited to hear what you have to say. And absolutely. That should be encouraging to you. Now, we talked a lot about your magician tendencies. You have a mathematician tendency as well. I think you've always been interested in maths and numbers.
Yeah.
Is there what do you think is that all of these, and you talked about philosophy and history, sort of a polymath thing going on here. Maybe it's that enthusiasm for learning that can help somebody communicate or just be more comfortable in any given situation, because you never feel unprepared at a base level.
I don't know where that, for me personally, I don't know where that ability or desire just to suck up information from anywhere I came from, but it certainly that's massively helped me, right? And again, that's one of the reasons I started my How to Speak Data newsletter. Was the first few years of that were just like, here's 3 things that are very tangentially related to data, that relate to data, right? It could be clips from a movie, it could have been, a pop science book I read or a radio show, right? It all feeds. So again, I highly recommend to everybody is like, go and diversify your inputs. I know it's I see the world changing, right? Social media, short attention spans. It's like, I guess I don't think the video platforms are really good ways to diversify your knowledge, because they're going to try and force you down one path and you end up slave to their algorithms. So hey everybody, read more books.
Yeah, read more books.
Read more books.
I'm on board with that. Read more books.
Put the phones down, put them in a different room, get a cup of coffee, a beer, a cocktail, whatever, and go and sit and read a book for an hour.
And if a book's too hard, read an essay. Read something for put a record on. Read a book.
Just go and listen to an LP. I mean, just go and just disconnect from everything and do something analog.
That's something that my wife and I have been getting into lately, is listening to LPs. And what we realize is that it's a commitment, because you've put this record on, you're going to listen to that for about 22 minutes.
Yeah.
So you're going to, whatever those songs are, you're not going to like get up and be like, oh, I'm going to skip this one, or I'm going to you're going to hear it as a chunk, and you can settle into it. And it is a very different experience than skip. It's this other playlist.
And I think, if there's any younger people listening to these 2 50-year-olds, mid-50 guys harping on about the old days, that is, and I'm sure you don't mean it this way either, Mike, that is not the good old days comment. It's just a different way of engaging, right? It's just a different way to engage with content, because having access to all the music is a pretty cool revolution that happened, but engaging slowly is nice.
It's also engaging with human. Now, I'm going to tell a story that may stay in here and may not stay in here. But the last time my wife and I went to the record store, we went in separate directions, and we both came back with the album, The Trinity Sessions by the Cowboy Junkies. Now, this album came out in 1989. My wife and I met in 2011. So what happened is that we both realized that when we were much younger, we were both really into this semi-obscure album, and had found it in the same record store where there were 2 copies of it. And we both decided we want to have this record. And I think it is indicative of the fact that there was some connection, not just between us after we met, between us maybe who we were when we were younger, and music and analog things can bring us together in a way that it's harder to do with digital. When we talk about community now, we lament the loss of our professional community on Twitter, because it used to be more robust, maybe like 8-ish years ago. It's not really as robust as it used to be, hard to find people. But your communities, your people who you actually interact with on a regular basis, you talked about, where do you find people, or where do you get opportunities to speak that's low stakes? I find this at pub trivia, because I host pub trivia nowadays. So I see people who I wouldn't interact with otherwise, but we build a community that way. Which reminds me that your co-author, Steve Wexler, and I are going to eventually rope you into joining Learned League.
Yes. I haven't had the email invite.
The daily trivia contest. But someday we will. So I wanted to make note of something, which is that you referred to, you were a Tableau evangelist. You were no longer at Tableau, but it's a good time for reminiscences when we move on, because a company is more than what they do or the products they make. A company is, when we're a part of it, it's the people we work with and those connections we make, the community that we build. Yes, it's the real company, it's the friends we made along the way, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we call people good company when they're pleasant.
Yeah.
But surely along the way, you've probably met some folks, learned some things that shaped you as a person. And I wondered if there was anyone or anything in particular who made your time there extraordinarily memorable.
I mean, there's many. I think the obvious one that people see publicly is Iron Viz, right? You know, that crazy idea by Ross Perez back in 2010, 2011. He left Tableau about 2016. He's like, let's do this doofy thing. And, you know, Ellie, Elisa, Christian, Chris, and Pat were all up for crazy ideas. To see that evolve into the show it became by the last time I've hosted it, 2025, that alone is amazing. And then to have been given the opportunity to host it in 2018 was incredible. So, you know, I co-hosted with Jewel, Keisha, Danica, Archana. They were my co-hosts. You know, we went... They are quite an adventure to get on stage. We had a lot of behind the scenes and even on stage things that went wrong, but we had to cope with. So the learning experiences there were amazing. And I think, you know, going back to the being more comfortable as a speaker, the last 2 years, I knew how to do Iron Viz, right? I knew I'd gone through all the problems that could have happened, right? So it enabled me in the last 2 years to finally fully embrace helping the contestants on their journey.
Yeah.
You know, the memories of data analysts who've won this dubious prize of standing on stage in front of their peers to be judged by them, turning up at the conference venue, like, I'm an introvert, I'm a data nerd. You know, we skew to introvert, or data people skew to introversion, and then being like, well, let's get you to the point you can walk on that stage and just embrace that moment where everyone cheers you. Will Sutton is the go-to example of that. The first day we put him on the stage in rehearsals, he was like this shrunken, trying to make himself as small as possible, and his career has blossomed. So that's a key one. I think, you know, as I was in the process of leaving Tableau, I went back to one of the original PowerPoint decks that Chris Stolte, who is one of the co-founders, used to share when I started about why did we build Tableau. And you know, I realized how important that deck was in what those co-founders built, because it was about data analysis being an expressive, iterative, touchy-feely process, a recognition that you don't really know what you want to see until you've started seeing it. So you have to hone in to the best articulation of the data. You know, even the fact that the data preparation is part of that process. I just think that, you know, I look back on that as such a core skill for any data analyst. You know, again, your audience, hopefully they realize that power of iteration and the recognition. So I'll go with those two things. But there were so many other people along the way. But yeah, I'll get emotional if I start carrying on, Gary.
Well, then let's move out of that and talk about, now that you have a very different schedule ahead of you, is there anything that you're eager to finally do now that you have the opportunity?
To finally do, well, Dashboards to Deliver comes out in a couple of weeks. I might be signing a contract to write another book. What a glutton for punishment, but I won't share any details about that, but I'm very excited about it. Something else I've been doing a lot of the last few weeks is sketching, right? And a lot I've been doing I always like just fine lines with ink pens, right? And so I'm just doing abstract art, but as I'm doing these abstract doodles, lots of them look like line charts and pie charts and Gantt charts. So I feel like I'm flushing out 20 years of looking at detailed charts and lines in this expressive analog way. My wife tells me I can't become a full-time artist. There's children who need to go to college. So what is actually Andy Cotgreave going to be doing? I'm going to concentrate for the short term on speaking, writing, training, and advising. And then I'm going to see where that goes after about a year or so. You know, I'm at that stage in my career where I get a lot of joy from sharing the wisdom, particularly to the younger generation. You know, if they're willing to listen to an old 50-year-old, 50-plus-year-old, then I can try and pass that on. So I think that's the goal. That's the goal.
I think that's an excellent plan forward. I wonder if you realize that you are now sliding away from the Stephen Fuse side back towards the David McCandless side as you're sketching out into the park with your data.
I think I slid away from the Stephen Fuse side probably in about 2014, 2015. But yeah, I think I'm, possibly more. Gosh, yeah. Which side am I?
The fulcrum it's tilting.
Yeah, sides. We shouldn't be taking sides. There are too many people taking too many sides. It's just,
that's excellent.
Yeah.
So, Andy, let me just wrap things up by reminding people that Dashboards That Deliver is available on September 23rd in perpetuity throughout the universe. Add it to your cart, of course, along with Storytelling with Data Before and After. Also,
yeah, that's also a great book. Yes.
Yeah, shares a release date and a publisher.
Yeah.
Andy Cotgreave can be found, as always, at gravyanecdote.com.
Oh, no, actually. Unfortunately, I didn't pay for maintenance.
Oh, no.
Well, so that's so find me on LinkedIn.
Andy can be found on LinkedIn, where his username is not an anagram of his own name. I'm embarrassed to say it took me several years to figure out that Gravy Anecdote was an anagram of Andy Cotgreave. But Andy,
if any listeners want to play around with an anagram finder and finding more non-safe for work anagrams of my name, do go ahead, but I won't share them now.
Mine is Senior Chemicals.
Love it.
Sorry,
Andy,
it's just an always, and today as well, an absolute joy in speaking to you. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Well, Mike, always a pleasure. It's a shame we can't be in the same place to compare shoes and high quality footwear, but yeah, as always, thanks for having me, and thanks for everything you and the team are doing to the community of data communicators as well.
Absolutely. And folks who are in the community, thanks for listening today. Thanks for supporting Andy, Dashboards That Deliver, and Storytelling with Data. And that is all for today. I'm Mike Cisneros, and I'll talk to you next time.